Well, hello there. We're back, and so are you. Or maybe you're not back. Maybe you're here for the first time. But if you are, whether you're back or not back, welcome to Bloom Talks, which we do every Thursday, 12:30 Pacific time. And we welcome you. Glad that you're here wherever you're tuning in from. I'm Charlie.
Linda Bloom here.
And we're here to talk about apologies and how to make effective apologies, because there's a big difference between making an effective apology and an ineffective one. And probably most of us have had experience being on the receiving end and the delivering end of both. So today we're going to be talking about some of the things that really make an apology effective and why it is so important to develop the ability to apologize. Mm-hmm. I think it's probably one of the most neglected aspects of relationships. I think that most relationship self-help books do not give sufficient attention to the art, and it is an art and a science of making effective apologies. And the reason that it's so important is because most people, probably somewhere in the vicinity of 99.999% of us, at some point or another, will have reason to apologize. That is, we will have cause to feel some degree of regret, remorse, responsibility, concern about something that we've done or said in a relationship that we feel we would like to repair because it's caused some hurt feelings, some confusion, some upset. And given the fact that the need to apologize is something that is going to come up in virtually all relationships, it really behooves us to be able to do that well. Now, we all know of people who have great difficulty apologizing. And, some of the people tuning in today may have difficulty doing that. And there's good reason for having some apprehension or concern about that. We're going to get into some of that today. So, you have anything you want to say about it?
I have plenty to say about this because I believe that it's so important. Do you know, we live on the coast of California, and we live in an area where surfing is a big deal. So every day of the year, Christmas, Easter, raining, when it's cold, the surfers are out there, and they need to keep their balance. Do you know that's a really important part of surfing? And there is this poster of Swami Satchidananda in a loincloth on a surfboard, balanced on his surfboard. And the caption is, "You cannot stop the waves from coming, but you can learn to surf." So the surfers out there in the ocean, they know that those waves are just going to keep coming. They're going to keep coming. They're going to keep coming. But they learn how to keep their balance, and they fall off their board and they get back up and they learn how to keep their balance some more. And that's how we learn. The metaphor of surfing is to know that life is going to give us sometimes big waves that are going to knock us down. No matter how hard we try to keep our balance, there's going to be some mistakes. No matter how committed we are to excellence, we're sometimes going to inadvertently hurt our partner. And we're going to need to clean up. We're going to need to get back on that board and find our balance again. And the best of relationships have, the fall down, get up. They have fall off the board, get back on. And so if we learn the fine art of repair, and the best relationships are champions of repair, it's going to hold us in good stead. But most people think that if you say, "I'm sorry," that's an apology and that's it. And that's a good start, but it's only the brief version. What we have found is that the people who studied the fine art of repair and the fine art of apology have the nuances of what allows the apology to be really successful. So any harm that has been done is healed. So any trust that has been broken has been restored, and maybe then some. So that there's subcategories underneath I'm sorry that are essential to focus on. The first being, it must be sincere or it won't work. If you're just going to say I'm sorry as a toss away to try to get the breakdown behind you, the other person's going to feel that. If they don't feel the sincerity that you're truly contrite, they're not going to be soothed by that, and the repair won't happen.
Another factor that's really essential is to begin with an intention, to be aware of what your intention is in your desire to apologize. That is, what is it that you want to have happen as a result of this? And the thing that you've got to keep in mind is that the result that you're looking for out of your intention, maybe it's understanding, maybe it's forgiveness, maybe it's to restore trust back in the relationship if it's been damaged. But whatever it is, it may not come about immediately after the apology is issued. And so we've got to be willing to give your partner the space and the time to allow themselves to really consider whether they feel that there has been sincerity, whether you really can be counted on to have learned whatever the lesson is for you, so that it's less likely that this transgression will occur again. Of course, there's never any guarantees, but if we haven't learned something there, then it's more likely that we could repeat it.
So related to intention is timing. If you try to rush it just to get through it, to try to get it behind you, you probably are not going to have as successful a repair as if you wait a moment and get to the place, maybe many moments, till you can get yourself calmed down and really look inside and see if you're ready to give the apology and that it's coming from a pure place inside yourself. Now, you might get ready and you're ready to give the apology, but the other person maybe is still too angry, or they're still too hurt, or they're still feeling too guarded and protected, and they're not ready. So that's when the patience comes in, to give them a chance to settle down and watch for the opening for when you can deliver your sincere apology with your clean, clear intention. And the timing is critical. Sometimes people try to rush before they're really ready to do it, or they try to rush before their partner's ready to be a gracious receiver.
And this next one is very important, and it's one that a lot of people miss. And that is to exclude any justifications, excuses, rationalizations for what you did.
All the stories,
and do not use the word but. Because if you're apologizing, as soon as you say the word but, what you've just done is you have basically invalidated everything you just said. And the other person is not really likely to absorb anything that you say after they hear that word. So it's basically about the willingness to actually take responsibility for what you did, to not explain it or rationalize it, even though you know that you've got good reasons, or feel that you've got good reasons to feel the way you do, or to say what you said. But to keep those off of the table, because they're irrelevant. You can have that conversation another time after the two of you feel more complete with this.
Another piece of it is to share with your partner what you learned out of the breakdown. As far as I'm concerned, that's even more important than saying, I'm sorry. Because if you say, I learned something about you in this breakdown, that this is so important to you, and I'm really telling you that I get it, and that going forward, things will be different because my consciousness is up about this. I'm alerted. I'm more sensitive to this issue before, and I'm going to be more careful. And that can be reassuring because we all know that talk is cheap, and many of us, probably most of us, if not all of us, have had people say, I'm sorry, and then they go and do the same doggone thing again. And so it's not erasing what happened. You know, if we can demonstrate by our words and our behavior, I learned something from this. And going forward, you can count on me to do it differently out of this learning. This has been a growing experience for me.
Now, this next one, we made a brief reference to it earlier, but I want to bring it up again, say a little bit more about it because it's so important. And that's the word patience. That when you offer an apology, particularly when it's for something that has been a serious transgression, something big, don't expect that the other person is going to just all of a sudden forgive you and not feel bad about it and have everything be wonderful like it used to be before the transgression. It can take time. It can take sometimes a long time, depending upon how serious the offense was. Mm-hmm. So I want to give an example of how this can play out. We worked with a couple one time, and he had an affair, and he revealed that in the session, and obviously, well, to put it really mildly, she was upset. Like she wanted to kill him. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, there were no weapons around, so she resisted that temptation. But it took her a while to really accept his apology. When I say a while, this was months. And to his credit, what he did during that time was he kept continuing to demonstrate that he had learned something through his behavior and through his words, and he didn't continue to try to convince her that he was trustworthy. He accepted her non-readiness to forgive and let go of what she was feeling, mm-hmm. and just continued to make the effort to show that he was trustworthy. And one of the things that he said to her on a few occasions was, I know that you don't trust me, I understand. I take responsibility for what I did, and I want you to know that I do trust myself, and I have all the time that you need available to you to take whatever time you need to get to the point where you will trust me as much as I trust myself. And I don't want you to have to worry about telling me about how upset you were. And I can hear that. And I know that at some point you'll feel the way I do.
Mm-hmm. So in this example, can you hear the vulnerability that he was speaking to her with? He wasn't guarded. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't saying, what the hell are you taking so long to get over this for? He was really coming from a place of understanding and tenderness and compassion and patience. The vulnerability is key. And this is the main reason why some people find apologizing so hard. They don't want to let that down defense. They don't want to take that armor off. They don't want to be open to, somebody's going to attack them. They don't want to get vulnerable. But the most successful apologies must come from that place of being undefended. And when we speak from that vulnerable place, there isn't any guarantee that we're offering our, tender parts, and the person isn't going to come in and, stab us. That's why it's so scary. And if you are stuck on, they have to say it, and they have to say it now, and they have to say it with certain words, you're working against your own best interests. Because some people have it in their history that when they were a vulnerable child, for instance, they were forced to say they were sorry, even when they didn't really feel it. And they had to sell out their own integrity because the big giant, parents insisted on it, or the older sibling insisted on it and rubbed their nose in it. And it was really humiliating, and they felt bad about selling themselves out. And some people on some level said, I'm never selling myself out that way again. And the way they go about it is they won't apologize to anybody, even if they know they're in the wrong anytime. If you can be the person who has been harmed, but hold the possibility that if they feel safe enough with you, they might explain why it is that they got so rigid about, I'm never apologizing for anything, even if I know I'm in the wrong, I'm not going to say it. If they have that attitude, you may be able to be part of the healing so that they can get past that barrier. And look for the opportunities to see how they may be gesturing with behaviors, extra special kindness that they're doing, that they're trying to make it up to you and make amends without the actual saying, I'm sorry, until they can heal that place that they feel that they violated themselves by saying it when they really didn't mean it.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to say, I'm sorry, not just with words, but with your behavior. And I love the title of that Elton John song, Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word. And for some of us, it is the hardest word for some of the reasons that Linda just mentioned. And another reason that it can be is because we associate apology with responsibility, which it is. It is absolutely linked to it. When I apologize for something, basically what I'm saying is I take responsibility for this action or for having said this. And that makes me vulnerable to being blamed, to being punished, to being hurt, to having it thrown back in my face. And if we had experiences in our past with other people who exploited that vulnerability, if we apologized, then we're going to be very reluctant to put ourselves in that vulnerable position again, because it's going to feel to us like we're handing somebody a weapon that they can use and that they will use against us. See, I told you, I knew that was true. And that's why I don't even want to talk to you again. I'm glad you finally admitted it, because not everybody has the presence of mind and the understanding to be able to accept an apology and without reacting to that person with their own desire for revenge or for punishment. And if we experienced punishment when we were caught or when we took responsibility for something, we're going to be less likely to be able to be responsible in that sense and to apologize.
So sometimes this is one of the reasons that people don't want to apologize, because they equate offering their apology with taking full responsibility. And it usually isn't 100% one person's fault. Right. It's often a blend. Sometimes it's 80-20, sometimes it's 40-60. But when we step into the leadership role and we start that healing process going, if we take responsibility for our peace, it often invites reciprocity that the other person will take some responsibility for the part they played. It doesn't guarantee that they will take responsibility for the part they played. We can't get too attached to that. They may not be ready, they may not see it, that we just do our part, that we hold up our end, and that we don't sit there and say, okay, I took my responsibility for my part. Now it's your turn. You tell me what you're apologizing to me for. That's not going to get you to a good place. You just mind your own business. Don't be confessing their sins or asking them to confess their sins. You just take responsibility for your own. And I wanted to say one more thing. If you're one of those people who believes the myth that love means never having to say you're sorry, drop it right away, because it's not working for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's there's good reasons why apologies can be really difficult to make. But the benefit, what you stand to gain from taking the risk of accepting that responsibility, is that you get to not only restore trust back into the relationship that might have been damaged to some degree as a result of a transgression or a perceived transgression, but you can actually up-level it to an even higher degree. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's really a good thing to be able to be very specific about exactly what it is that you're apologizing for. Apology doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with you that I have done a terrible thing and that I deserve to be punished. Apology means that I'm acknowledging something that I did or said that had a particular impact on you, and I understand what you felt and how you experienced that, and I have some degree of sadness or remorse or regret about that. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean I'm responsible for my response, but I am not responsible for how you dealt with it. Mm-hmm. I'm responsible for having done something that maybe I was not sufficiently attuned to your feelings, or maybe I wasn't sufficiently aware of your concern about this situation or your sensitivity to it. And I have some remorse that I participated in this in a way that influenced you to feel that way. But I'm not saying that I am to blame for everything. Like Linda said, I'm not agreeing that this is all my fault, mm-hmm. but I am accepting my part in it. And I have learned something. And here's what I learned. And I'm doing this because I don't want there to be anything in the way of our relationship being as mutually fulfilling and trustworthy as it can be.
And the being specific is reassuring to the person who's receiving the apology that the person who's giving the apology really understands. And I want to emphasize this point about, if you say, I'm sorry you feel that way, that is not an apology. It kind of sounds like it's an apology, but it's not the real thing.
No.
You have to be specific about the thing that you're contrite about. And not to be thorough is going to increase the chances that there's not a healing. To be thorough and to be specific is going to increase the chances that you've been thorough enough for the trust to be restored. Mm-hmm. Here's another thing that will really increase the chances that the trust is restored. Don't make the mistake of thinking, I already told her, or I already told him once I was sorry and I was specific about it. You may need to repeat yourself. You may need to say it 2 times. You may need to say it 3 times. You may need to re-say it 4 times, depending on how bad the transgression was. So don't get grumpy and say, I already apologized. What do you want me to do? Grovel? Do you know? Mm-hmm. That is going to take you backwards, not forwards. Sometimes people are going to need to be reassured more than one time how sorry that you are that you caused harm.
Yeah, and before we finish up, I want to just say something about the person on the receiving end of the apology, because sometimes that person has a lot of trouble accepting it. That may have nothing to do with the way you're delivering it, or what you're saying. But for whatever reason, they may have trouble with it, and they may think that, I need certain things from this person before I'm going to be able to trust them again, or I need more repetitions of what it is that he's saying or that she's saying. And there is a point at which, if somebody continually is expressing a refusal, not an inability, but actually a refusal to accept the apology, then it may be important for that person to really look at what it is that is in their way and what it is that they need in order to feel more complete with this. Mm-hmm. Because, there's a saying that you can never get enough of what you really don't need. And if you don't know what you need, you can continually be demanding or asking for or requesting an apology, but that may not be it. That may not be what you need. So one of the things that the apologizer can do if they're in a situation like that is to ask the person, I'm trying to reassure you. I've been trying to for a while. It doesn't seem like I'm really getting through to you. Can you tell me what it is that you need from me that you're not getting that might help you to get more complete with this?
Mm-hmm. That's one of the reasons that the completion doesn't happen, and the success and the lightening of the energy and the trust restored doesn't happen, because one party is still not being forthcoming with what they need to see happen for it to really be at rest.
No, they may not know. Maybe they're just not even clear about it. Asking them that will help them to look at that.
Asking, are you ready to forgive me yet? Can help show that, can help illuminate that. And if the person says, no, I'm not ready to accept that, not to get in a huff about it, but say, what would it take to finally lay this at rest? Okay. Because some time needs to pass. They need to be seeing evidence that it's not going to happen again. Some amends need to be made, and that's just information that shows you some more work needs to be done. Big surprise.
Which takes us to the topic that we're going to be talking about next week, which is directly related to this, which has to do with forgiveness. Uh-huh. Because ultimately that's one of the things that we're hoping to experience when we do apologize. And we may get it, like we said, we may get it right away. It may be a while. It may be a long time coming. There's a saying that forgiveness is letting go of the hope of ever having a better past.
Uh-huh. Just a personal note for the ending. Some of you that are listening in know that we have a new book that's out that's called That Which Doesn't Kill Us, How One Couple Became Stronger Than Broken Places, that talks about a really dark time in our relationship. And one of the reasons that we were able to get through that really dark time is we learned this in the trenches about apologizing and forgiving, because we hurt each other a lot during that time in our clumsiness and our lack of consciousness. Fortunately, that was 25 years plus ago. We haven't been damaging each other and breaking the
trust. Haven't apologized ever since, have we?
Oh, no. But when we talk about this, we didn't learn this in the book. We didn't learn this from books. We learned this in the trenches, which we wrote the book about. So there's a very detailed account about what a transformation it was from us, because we were deprived. You know, that we didn't have models about how to do this well. We had a big learning deficit. So
especially you.
Occasionally we would say, I'm sorry, but that's all we would do. And then I'd get in a huff. Well, I said I was sorry, so what are you still mad about? So we learned how to be really thorough and do a comprehensive job. So if you want to get the more detailed version of it, then you can read it in the book.
And in the meantime, get back in the trench and practice.
Okay.
See you next week.
All right.